Okay, so can I have a show of hands? Any of you who were here last time? Yeah. Okay. Okay, so a fair amount of you. So you would remember that we did talk extensively about, considering whether a corporate deal or going for a larger business deal is for you. Now, today, we wanted to carry on with that conversation and explore what it takes to understand how large or complex, complex organizations award a contract. So what I'm going to walk you through today, and I will open it up for a conversation as well, is explore how to find the contracts in the first place, talk a bit about writing a bid or a proposal for a larger contract, and then look at the main area of our focus today, which is matrix or large organizations. How do they award a contract, and how can you understand the process enough to enable you to get the most out of it and potentially win a contract if you're going for that. And then finally, so you've won a contract, so what? So I want to give you some ideas in terms of what to expect once you've won a contract. I also have a list of some places where you could potentially find contracts, so I will copy and paste that in the chat later as well. And if you have any questions as we go through, feel free to unmute yourself and ask that question, or you can put it in the chat as well, and then I'll come back to that later. Okay, so how do you find contracts? Because if we want to find a contract, a larger contract, then it's important that we know where to find them. So there are a wide range of places that you can look for if you're looking for a contract. For me, one of the biggest considerations, as we hinted at the last time, would be what type of organization do you look at when it comes to you choosing what is your corporate. And we discussed that, for some people, a corporate organization for their type of business could be a business that employs 10, 20 and more people. Whereas for others, they would say they have to turn over X million pounds or dollars. So I know it will differ from one person to the other, but keep that in mind throughout this conversation that we're going to have. And it's important for you to also consider things like public versus private sector, because they are very, very different entities, and the cultures within these types of organizations are also very different. And for instance, if you went for a public sector contract, chances are the contract to be huge. I mean, most of the contracts that I see come through sometimes for public sector would be in the millions. But the other thing that I gave you a hint on the other day was you probably don't want to go for the £1 million project if you are a very small business. But how about, setting yourself up so that you're aware of who gets awarded the £1 million contract? And then you can go to them and say, hey, can I subcontract to you and help you deliver this? So there is a lot to look at, in terms of your strategy in putting your foot in the door or winning more of these larger contracts. So where do you find these contracts? Internal recommendations, I find, can be really, really good. And so maybe someone who is in that organization, and they may say to you, we potentially may be looking for someone to come and deliver this project for us. So keep your ears on the ground for internal recommendations, and also be bold. So for instance, when you do your 60 seconds, or when you're speaking to people, you might say, I'm looking for organizations, that could, and if someone could connect me with, because the referrals are always a great way. However, when it comes to larger organizations, the internal referrals or knowing someone internally within the organization will put you a foot in the door, but you still have to go through their main vetting processes. So you will still be dealing with a complex team, for instance, the procurement teams, the contract owners, other people who have skin in the game within the organization, for instance, someone in charge of finance and all of that. So keep that in mind. Okay, so where else could you find a contract? They would normally advertise in different portals. For instance, for some, it could be on their own website, and for others, there could be a community or partnership portals. You find that a lot of organizations, for instance, universities will have a portal where you can go and you find a lot of kind of third sector or university or education contracts. And there are similar portals for private sector contracts as well. So I'll put, as I said, I'll put a link of some of those contracts, especially I found one that was more to do with the public sector. So I'll put that in there for you. But also LinkedIn could be a good source. My latest contract, I saw it being advertised on LinkedIn and I approached them, expressed my interest. I went through the process and I won a contract, you know, over summer. So LinkedIn could be a very good one as well. I've already mentioned government procurement portals. Agencies could be a good way. So some people will award through agencies. And then finally, speculative proposals. Yes, that still works. And so if you really, really want to supply to a certain type of organization and you don't seem to see any kind of opening for you, why don't you, send them a proposal yourself? Because that could work. The good old phone call still works as well. So find the person you want to connect with because they could potentially award you that contract. Give them a call, connect with them on LinkedIn, give them a call and send them a proposal and start it from there because it still works. So those are areas in terms of how you can find a contract, a larger contract. So once you found, once you've identified that, then you have to write the proposal or the bid. And we talked a bit more about this the last time, so I won't go into more detail, but I will highlight the importance of playing to your strengths and responding to every single point within the bid or within the request for proposal. So for instance, if you're directly responding to a request for proposal, they will have different areas or different points that you need to respond to say, I meet this criteria. It's important that you respond to each and every one of them, because in some instances, if you don't, you won't even get through the door to being kind of invited for an interview or to defend your proposal. Okay, so let's move on to the matrix organization within some of these large organizations and how does it work when, how do they award the contract? As I said, it will be coming from different areas. So you would have the person who actually owns the contract. They have a budget, the program or the project belongs to them, but their decision is not always final. So, you will, if you are going for an interview, for instance, or in terms of how they consider awarding you, it won't come from one person. It will come from that contract owner plus the procurement team who will make sure that certain things or like ethical standards and things like that within the organization are met. And so always keep that in mind. And sometimes, most of the time, you would find who this contract sits with, as well as the type of people who are involved in it. And so what I do, for instance, with the most recent contract I'm talking to you about, when I found out that, which department it belonged to, when they called me to invite me for an interview, they also said, I specifically asked them, so who will be on my panel? The interview panel, or sometimes it could be a negotiation panel. And they gave me details of someone who had a background in finances, someone who actually owns the product and the program, because this was a program to mentor SMEs, but it was being delivered by a university. It's a government program being delivered by a university. So I asked all of those, and they had other people on the panel. And because I knew who they were going to be, I was able to prepare so that when I was speaking to them, I was able to speak to everyone's area of interest, so they don't feel left out, but they also feel special, and they will say something good for you, because sometimes they all have to say yes before you are awarded the contract. And once again, don't forget your negotiation. Is so important to have your negotiation prepared before you go to any of these conversations. because there may be something that you need to negotiate. Okay, so let's assume you're successful. Sometimes when we're successful, we just say thank you and we get excited about delivering the program. It's important for you to still ask why. Why were you successful, so you can replicate your success, or you can keep that in mind as you deliver and do more and more of the good thing that gave you the opportunity. Maybe you were not successful, still don't leave it there, don't get too disheartened. It's always a learning and an opportunity. Ask why. And I remember I did ask why another time, and then the lady, so this was one where you send a proposal and they will award a contract and they will just email you to say you were not successful. And then I got back and asked why, and the lady kind of booked an appointment to get to know me. And then before I realized, when another opportunity came, she emailed me and said, you may be stronger in this area, go for it, that kind of thing. So it's always good to use any answer, whether it's a yes or no, as an opportunity to move you to the next step. Okay, so let's assume that you've been awarded your contract. Well, congratulations. But the journey doesn't stop there, it's just started. So you have to, again, be prepared with dealing with complex multiple teams. And most of the time, these people are all kind of protecting their area within the organization. Everyone feels important in their area. And there are criteria that are more important to them. And complex organizations work like that for a reason, right? So it's important that you are prepared for that and you know how to deal with these scenarios. For instance, if they ask you to present, to provide them with information, so they will set you up on their procurement systems. So they will ask for things like your bank details for paying. They will, tell you specifically what their invoicing looks like. They will tell you specifically, well, when I say what their invoicing looks like, it's more how they expect you to invoice them and their invoicing terms. And always check, one of the things why sometimes it may not be very lucrative, it is lucrative most of the time, but it may not be easy for you to go for a larger contract, because sometimes they may have a longer term kind of invoicing term in terms of when they pay you, when you invoice them. But again, these are areas where you want to kind of see if you can negotiate. So for any payment term which is more than a month, do your best to try and negotiate and say, hey, I'm a smaller business or whatever, our invoicing term is normally a month. Is there any way, you can bring yours from 3 months or 2 months? And yes, 3 months exists, sometimes even 4 months. So you have to really, as a smaller business, you have to look for opportunities to negotiate in such a way that you don't run into cash flow problems, because most of the time you're also using this cash to deliver the program or the project that you've been, or the contract that you've been awarded. Yeah, and one thing I said here, again, once you've been awarded the contract, is do your best to provide consistent information and timely information to every department, so it is the same. Otherwise, if you say this to this department and another thing to another department, it can confuse their systems, and it could delay in terms of how you get paid and when you get paid and all of that. And I said before, ask the right questions, ask for payment terms, see if you can negotiate, make sure that your cash flow works for you. But ultimately, what I've said is, when it comes to larger contracts, in how these are awarded in larger organizations, it's a complex deal. You're never dealing with one person. The other thing is, the person who even awarded you the contract may leave, and then you have a relationship kind of thing to also negotiate your way through the organization. So again, we are all networkers, so we love relationship building. It carries through every aspect of business. So make sure that you always building very strong relationships with every kind of person, every department that you're involved in, because it will serve you in the longer term. So that's me. I will bring it to the end, and I would, so just to recap, make sure that you know where to find your contract and how to find them. Make sure you know how to write a bid or a proposal or an expression of interest. Make sure you understand what it takes to work with matrix organization in the build up to actually being awarded the contract. And also, once you get awarded, it doesn't stop there. There's more complex relationships to build. Any questions, any comments?